Welcome to our PHP web course. In this video, we will cover control structures. In the next video, we will cover validation functions. A control structure is a block of programming code that analyzes variables and chooses a direction in which to go based on given parameters. So rather than just executing code from top to bottom, the code is executed based on analyzing certain conditions. In PHP, as in most programming languages, we have control structures known as conditionals and known as loops. In this class, we will look at the if conditional and the switch statement conditional. We will also look at the for loop. We will look at the other loops later on in this course. Control structures typically work with comparison operators and logical operators. Here you see the comparison operators, and we're generally comparing two or more variable values. So these values can be equal to each other, meaning they look the same, identical, meaning not only do they look the same, but they have the same data type. They can be not equal. We have two different symbols for not equal. We also have the symbol for not identical. They can be greater than something, less than something, greater than or equal to something, less than or equal to something. And we have this new spaceship operator, which will be covered in the next slide. Comparison operators can be used with logical operators. The common logical operators are AND, meaning both variable values, OR, meaning one or the other variable values, XOR, which also means one or the other, but not both. We also can use the double ampersand for AND, the double pipe symbol, which is located on top of the enter key for the OR, and we also have the exclamation point for the not logical operator. The spaceship operator, which is new in PHP 7, is another way of evaluating if x and y is equal. So not only does it evaluate if it's equal, but it can also evaluate if one is less than or greater than the other. They do this by returning different values. It will return 0 if x is equal to y, -1 if x is less than y, and +1 if x is greater than y. The if conditional statement can take many forms. Let's start with a simple if. It is built upon a condition. If that condition is true, the code to be executed inside the curly braces will be executed. If that condition is not true, nothing will be executed, nothing will happen. So here we have an example, x equals 30, and here is our condition, x greater than 20. So if x is greater than 20, the code inside the curly braces will execute. If x is not greater than 20, nothing will happen. So in this case, we would see the echo statement being executed because x indeed is greater than 20. We have an if-else conditional statement. This is the if condition with an else clause. In this situation, we are still evaluating the same condition. The only difference is that if it is now not true, or if it is false, we can execute some code. So if the condition is true, the code inside the curly braces will execute it. Else, meaning the condition is not true or false, then this code can be executed. So in an if-else conditional statement, we execute code both for the true condition or for the false condition. So in either case, something will be executed. So if we look at our sample here, x equals 10, in our if condition, we have x greater than 20. So if this condition is true, the statement in the curly braces will execute. However, that statement is not true because x equals 10. Now we have the else clause. The else clause meaning that the condition is not true. Therefore, the code inside the curly braces of the else clause will execute because the condition was not true or it was false. So again, code will be executed if the condition is true or if the condition is false. We also have an if-else-if conditional. This is used to execute code based on more than one condition. In the previous examples, we were analyzing the same condition. Now we are going to analyze different conditions. So if the first condition is true, the code inside the curly braces will be executed. If the second condition is true, the code inside those curly braces will be executed. If the third condition is true, the code inside those curly braces will be executed, and on and on. You typically will see a final else here, and that is the default, meaning if none of the above are true, then this statement or code will be executed. I would like to point out that the first time the condition returns true, PHP exits out of it. It does not continue reading further. So you always want to test every variation because you could have several trues, and in that case, your application may have a bug. I would like to point out the layout of the code. The curly braces can be laid out as you see here, or they can be lined up on the left. The choice is yours. However, you want to be very consistent in how you write your code. It makes it easy for you to understand and easy to debug should there be a mistake. The switch conditional statement also allows you to test for different conditions and to execute code based on different conditions being true. It seems to be more like a condensed version of an if-else-if. The if-else-if can be cumbersome to write if you have many conditions to test. So here we have the switch statement, and the condition that we are testing for is the value of the variable. Each condition is identified by a case and the value and then a colon. Underneath that we have the code to be executed. Then we have a break. If that condition is true, the code will be executed, and then you need that break to exit out of the switch. So again, we have multiple conditions, each one being indicated by the case. We have the code to be executed and the break statement. At the end, you typically see a default. This is the code to be executed should none of the above be true. I would like to point out the syntax of the switch. Everything is inside one set of curly braces. The for loop, which is also part of most programming languages, allows you to run some code over and over again when you know in advance how many times the script should run. Knowing in advance means that it can be determined based on possibly a variable or some other means. The syntax for a for loop consists of 3 parameters inside the parentheses, followed by the curly braces. Inside the curly braces is the code to be executed for each iteration. So the goal is to iterate through the loop several times, and as long as the condition is true, the code inside the curly braces will execute. We typically start out with some kind of counter, and the test condition which has some kind of a numeric conditional value, and an increment. So every time we loop through the for loop, we will be incrementing the counter and comparing that number to a value in the test condition. Here is an example of using a for loop. Here we have x being initialized to 0, our condition x is less than or equal to 10, and our increment x plus plus. We saw that operator earlier in this course. Notice that the counter and the condition are followed by semicolons, however, the increment is not. And now we have the curly braces. On the right, you can see the result of this code. What we're doing is we're echoing the numbers starting with 0 up until 10. So when the condition is no longer true, the loop will stop. How this works: the first time round, the counter technically does not increment, as strange as that may seem. So the first time round, x equals 0, as you see in the output here. So when we reach the end of that loop, then we're actually incrementing. So the second time round, x equals 1. We check the condition, x being less than or equal to 10, and yes, the condition is true. Then we execute the code inside the curly braces, and then we increment the number again. As strange as it may seem, because the increment is inside the parentheses, it's actually occurring after the statement is executed.